Where once he was revered as a boxing legend, now Thomas Hearns trudges a much emptier road. At 66, the chants have ceased, the crowd's gone, and left is a fighter struggling with time, with pain, and memories of a glories that feel long past, the rise of Thomas Hearns. Before Thomas Hearns became a boxing icon known as the Hitman, he was a lean, reserved kid from Detroit, Michigan. Born on October 18, 1958, Thomas was one of 3 children raised by his single mom, Lois Hearns. She struggled to get by, and her work ethic transferred to her son. Thomas wasn't born rich or famous. He was from a rough neighborhood and learned early how to fight in the ring and in life. Hearns wasn't the toughest boy on the street, but he was quick, intelligent, and very determined. He turned to boxing as a teenager. Initially, no one considered him and said, "future world champion." He was tall and skinny, not the typical build for a boxer. However, Thomas possessed what most lacked: heart and hunger. He began training in earnest, and before long, people were noticing his innate ability. The greatest turning point in Hearns' career occurred when he trained at the storied Kronk Gym in Detroit. That was not any ordinary boxing gym. It was a champion factory, and at its core was Emanuel Steward, perhaps the greatest boxing trainer of all time. Steward recognized something unique in Hearns. Not only did he learn him how to throw punches, but he guided his whole style of boxing and instilled within him the confidence he required. Under the tutelage of Steward, Hearns was transformed from a scrawny amateur to a lean, mean knockout machine. They spent time together fine-tuning his powerful right hand, something he would come to be known for as the Motor City Cobra. His right punch was so lethal, it could knock out a fighter in seconds. Hearns wasn't only quick and powerful, he possessed a serene, laser-sharp personality in the ring that made him dangerous. By the late 1970s, Hearns was establishing himself as a contender in the world of boxing. In 1977, he turned pro and soon accumulated a string of victories. Fight after fight, he defeated his opponents by knocking them out, and word began to spread. Fans became intrigued. Individuals began attending matches just to watch him finish a contest. Before long, he acquired his iconic nickname, the Hitman. He wasn't only winning, he was dominating. Hearns knocked out Mexican champion Pipino Cuevas in the second round in 1980 to claim the WBA welterweight title. He became an overnight superstar with that victory. His quickness and knockout ability made him one of the most feared fighters in the world. By then, Hearns was already a national hero from having moved from a retiring boy from Detroit to joining one of the best partnerships in boxing history alongside Emanuel Steward. He had earned the hearts of fans, yet the terror of opponents. While his rise had just begun, it was also evident that Thomas Hearns was destined for great things as he became a legend. Career highlights that shocked the world. The moment Thomas Hearns became a figure on the big time, he never lost any time in making boxing history. He was not winning bouts. Doing that would be easy enough. He was laying on spectacular displays of work, which kept spectators' hands glued to their seats. His life had plenty of those mythical moments, and everyone contributed towards solidifying his place in history as among the all-time greats. One of the greatest upsets in Hearns' career occurred in August 1980 when he fought WBA welterweight champion Pipino Cuevas. Cuevas was no pushover. He had been the title holder for 4 years and was considered tough as nails. But Hearns went into that bout with confidence and a strategy. Within 2 rounds, Hearns had destroyed Cuevas with a vicious right hand, finishing the fight and capturing the title. That victory sent a message to the boxing world. The Hitman had arrived, and he wasn't to be trifled with. Then there was one of the greatest fights in boxing history, his 1981 battle with Sugar Ray Leonard. This was not only a battle between 2 champions, but a battle between 2 contrasting styles. Leonard was smooth and flashy, while Hearns was long, powerful, and precise. The fight had it all: power, speed, drama, and heart. Hearns was leading on the scorecards for most of the bout, employing his jab and reach to dictate the pace, but in the later rounds, Leonard rallied hard and knocked out Hearns in the 14th round. Hearns lost that night, but gained enormous respect for his show and grit. It became one of the most memorable fights witnessed. Another unforgettable evening was in 1985 when Hearns fought Marvin Hagler for the middleweight title. This match, popularly referred to as The War, did the hype justice and more. Both fighters came at each other with everything they had from the first bell. The first round remains one of the most explosive rounds in boxing history. Hearns knocked Hagler cold early, but Hagler persisted. Hearns was stopped by Hagler in the third round in a thrilling conclusion. Hearns lost the bout, but fans never forgot how courageous, how skilled, and how he gave it everything he had inside the ring. Hearns also won big against other big names. In 1982, he battled Wilfred Benitez, a slick defensive wizard. Hearns displayed his technical skills and won a 15-round decision, claiming the WBC Super Welterweight title. Then, in 1984, he battled Roberto Duran and produced one of the most vicious knockouts of his career. He knocked out Duran in the second round, the only time Duran was ever knocked out cold. Arguably, the most incredible aspect of Hearns' career was that he continued to move up in weight and continued to dominate. He did not rest on welterweight or middleweight. He ultimately held world titles in 5 weight divisions, ranging from welterweight all the way to light heavyweight. He was the first boxer in history to win 4 different divisions and subsequently added a 5th. Thomas Hearns was not merely a fighter. He was a showman, a warrior, and a history maker. His career was filled to the brim with incredible highs, and every fight added a new dimension to his legendary status. In the 1980s, Thomas Hearns was not only a good boxer, but he was a superstar. This was the golden age of boxing, an era when Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, and Roberto Duran were stars. And right in their league was Thomas the Hitman Hearns. He had the ability, the knockouts, and the flair to match. Others weren't just seeing his fights. They were hearing about his battles for days to come, and he became a feared and revered man in his sport. With his newfound success in the ring came popularity outside of the ring. Hearns was one of the giants of sports news. He found himself appearing frequently on television's talk shows, in periodicals, and wrote up in profiles extolling his strength and charisma. Large companies wished to be affiliated with him, and he secured various endorsements that enhanced his earnings and reputation. He even secured sponsorship contracts with sports firms such as Everlast, and his face became recognizable to both die-hard boxing enthusiasts and general viewers. But it was not merely a matter of business. Hearns enjoyed the lifestyle of being famous. Finally, after years of fighting, he had the funds to indulge himself, and he didn't spare anything. He had a taste for the good life. One of his greatest hobbies? Automobiles. Hearns was infamous for getting behind the wheel of custom-made cars that attracted attention wherever he went. He was notorious for having a tricked-out white Rolls-Royce with gold-plated wheels and a matching fur interior. He also owned a Mercedes-Benz 600 and other luxury vehicles, many of which were fully customized. Clothing was also a large aspect of his persona. Hearns dressed in designer suits, flashy bling, and always ensured he stood out among a crowd. Whether he was pulling up to a fight, going to a party, or just strolling down the street, he dressed like a champion. Folks in Detroit would stop and gawk when Hearns drove by. He wasn't merely respected, he was admired for his panache. Thomas enjoyed the fame that went along with it. He reveled in the attention, flashing for cameras and giving fans a show. He wasn't arrogant, but he certainly enjoyed being noticed. He attended big events, walked red carpets, and mingled with other famous folks. He once appeared on The Arsenio Hall Show, discussing his fights and having a good time kidding around with the host. His charismatic nature even earned him a popularity status outside the ring. But beneath the glamour and flash, Hearns remained humble. He never really left Detroit, and everyone there continued to regard him as the hometown boy who made good. He also used his wealth to benefit others, donating to schools and youth programs. For a while, Hearns had it all: money, fame, respect, and the lifestyle most athletes would kill for. Unfortunately, that sort of flashy lifestyle wasn't cheap. The expenditure caught up with him down the line. But during the 1980s, Thomas Hearns was living large. He had transcended being a boxer. He was a figure of success, of strength, of swagger. The downfall. By the early 1990s, Thomas Hearns was no longer the invincible force he had been. The man who had awed the world with his speed and power was now mellowing out. Age, injuries, and years of vicious battles started to tell. Though Hearns continued to enter the ring, the magic was no more. The reflexes were not as quick, and the punches did not have the same sting. His career started going downhill as the younger boxers entered the ring. Hearns wasn't receiving the hefty paychecks or title fights that he once did. He still had devoted fans, but boxing had evolved. Although he continued to win a few more bouts during the 90s and early 2000s, he was no longer the headliner. He incurred some injuries, including a severely wounded right hand that restricted his renowned knockout ability. When he retired in 2006, the former great champion had slipped past his peak. Yet as his fighting life waned, something even worse began to occur outside of the ring. His finances disintegrated. Notwithstanding accumulating millions during his working life, Hearns found himself in financial trouble. He had a grand lifestyle, high-end cars, mansions, attire, and an extensive entourage. Not only did he spend on himself, but he also attempted to provide for a great number of people in his group. Friends, relatives, and others found it common practice to look to him for assistance. Hearns was charitable to the extreme, and many of them exploited that benevolence. To add insult to injury, he made some bad money moves. Hearns invested in business ventures that didn't work. From shady real estate investments to bombed-out investment opportunities, his cash dried up in no time. He put trust in the wrong men, business partners who promised fortune but delivered nothing. All these missteps cost him in back taxes and bills. In 2010, the affair became public when Hearns sold many of his most valued items, including championship belts and boxing memorabilia, to help pay off over $250,000 in outstanding taxes. For fans, it was sad to see a boxing legend in such a financial plight. The man who once dominated the ring now could barely stay afloat. His subsequent fights also did not help his reputation. Rather than walking away while still being respected, Hearns continued to go back to the ring, looking for one final payday. Some of these latter-day fights were painful to watch. The quickness was lost, and his body could no longer absorb the punishment like it used to. He got hurt, such as a knee injury, in his final professional bout. Most think that these last years did more ill than good, not only to his record but to his well-being. Hearns never formally filed for bankruptcy, yet his financial struggles lingered on for years. And though he remained active in boxing as an ambassador and trainer, the millions he had seen were long past. It was a tragic reversal for a man who contributed so much to the sport. From world champion to struggling retiree, Thomas Hearns' fall wasn't simply losing fights. It was losing stability, trust, and the secure future he had so zealously earned. Financial and legal struggles. For years, Thomas Hearns was boxing's brightest light. But even the biggest stars can have off times. And for Hearns, his off times arrived in the form of legal and financial woes that stunned fans. By the early 2010s, Hearns was drowning in debt. Even though he earned millions as a boxer, bad money management and ill-advised choices made him owe a great deal of money. One of the largest problems? Back taxes. Hearns was said to owe more than $500,000 to the IRS. This wasn't some small error. It was an enormous financial pit that had been accumulating for decades. Rather than quietly dealing with it, Hearns was forced to take it public. He sold many of his personal belongings at an auction in 2010. These were not ordinary possessions, they were valuable relics of his career. He sold championship belts, trophies, and various mementos, trying to make enough to settle his debt. To fans who recalled his heyday, seeing these pieces offered for auction was devastating. These were tokens of a mythical career, and now he was forced to sell them to survive. Later, into 2012, Hearns declared bankruptcy. He had less than $500 in cash at the time, but he owed hundreds of thousands, according to court documents. These included back taxes, charge accounts, and other miscellaneous costs. He also stated he spent a great deal of his cash assisting friends and relatives, which had become a habit during his lifetime. He attempted to treat those close to him well, but ended up finding himself deeply in debt. Through this period, Hearns mentioned in interviews that he wasn't bitter. He owned up to the fact that there were errors and that he had trusted the wrong individuals. He also took responsibility for the choices that got him there. What was impressive was that, even with the financial problems, he still walked with his head held high. He did not shy away from the public or offer excuses. He met the situation squarely, even if it meant selling his most intimate belongings. It wasn't all about the money. These legal issues also affected his reputation. A lot of people were surprised to find out that someone who had previously been so successful was now barely able to get by. Media outlets ran the story, and stories about Hearns' bankruptcy quickly spread. Some fans rallied behind him, but others blamed him for how he had managed his finances. Despite all this, Hearns attempted to stage a comeback, not in the ring, but in life. He remained active in the boxing world, trained up-and-coming fighters, and appeared at events. He still enjoyed respect in the sport, but the financial and legal issues were a reminder that even legends can fall. Thomas Hearns' tale during this period wasn't one of money. It was one of loss, remorse, and the difficulty of beginning anew when the spotlight breaks. And for somebody who had everything, it was a hard and agonizing section of his life. For years, Thomas Hearns was the prototypical explosive power puncher who, in the ring, showed no fear whatsoever. He fought the best of the best and never, ever backed away from a challenge. But those classic battles exacted a price. Following his retirement from boxing, the cumulative effect of all those vicious fights finally began to get the best of him. And now, fans are more concerned about his health than ever. Hearns didn't merely box ordinary fights, he boxed wars. His fights with Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, and Roberto Duran were wars of constant action, and most of them survived several grueling rounds. Although those fights became part of boxing history, they also left a severe toll on his body and mind. Similar to most boxers who have spent decades getting knocked on the head, Hearns began to exhibit physical deterioration after retiring from the sport. One of the largest issues is his mobility. At public appearances, particularly in recent years, Hearns has appeared to walk unsteadily or with assistance. His body has been beaten up. Years of training, injuries, and punishment in the ring have left him stiff and hurting. His hands, once used to drop opponents with vicious knockouts, now bear the signs of wear and tear, something that is difficult to avoid if you're close enough. Then there are the increasing concerns regarding his mental acuity. Fans and commentators have picked up on occasions where Hearns appears to be forgetful or unable to come up with the correct words when he is interviewed. Although he hasn't been very forthcoming about having been diagnosed with brain trauma, most people feel that he could be experiencing the symptoms of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a brain disease brought on by repeated blows to the head, prevalent among ex-boxers and football players. Hearns has even been slower of speech in certain interviews or struggled to recall earlier events. Such indicators, which at times were subtle, have raised concern from fans who spent their entire youth idolizing him. There have been suggestions of memory loss and disorientation behind the scenes, although nothing has been acknowledged by his family publicly. Regardless, the concern is there. On top of all that, age isn't helping matters. Hearns celebrated his 66th birthday in 2024, and as with many retired athletes, the aging process is even more difficult after a physically demanding career. His body is not what it once was, and along with previous injuries, it has made everyday tasks much more difficult. Despite these struggles, Hearns still tries to stay active in the boxing community. He's attended events, posed for photos with fans, and offered advice to younger fighters. But each appearance reminds people just how much damage the sport can do. He's not the vibrant, fast-talking showman he once was, and that's tough for many to see. For Thomas Hearns, the battle was not over once he retired. His struggle is now with the long-term toll that boxing took on his mind and body. And though he is still a proud champion deep down, there is no question that the years of fighting took a severe toll. Fans can only hope he finds peace and comfort in the years to come, even if those glory days are far behind him. While Thomas Hearns was made famous for what he accomplished in the ring, his own life has not been as solid as his jab. Behind the stardom, flashy existence, and championship belts, there have been actual struggles with family and relationships, particularly toward the end of his career. One of the most publicized relationships in his life is with his son, Ronald Hearns. Like his dad, Ronald also became a professional boxer. Initially, it appeared to be a proud legacy, son and father both pursuing greatness inside the ring. Ronald, who began his professional career in 2004, had some early success, even challenging for a middleweight title in 2011. But he never achieved the level of superstardom that his father had. It eventually became apparent that their relationship wasn't as close as fans would have liked. There have been rumors throughout the years that something wasn't right between them. Thomas pushed Ronald too much, according to some, or Ronald found it difficult to live in his father's shadow, say others. Though neither has spoken out about heavy drama, it is clear from their little appearances together that it hasn't always been easy between them. It's the sort of unspoken distance that cuts more than doable arguments. Aside from his romance with Ronald, Thomas has had his share of marital and romantic issues. While he's remained tight-lipped about his love life, people in his inner circle have averred that his years in the public eye, balanced with repeated travel, popularity, and financial anxiety, placed immense pressure on his personal life. It's not easy maintaining a stable home life when you're constantly in training camps or flying across the world for fights. Rumors of breakups, falling outs, and long stretches of loneliness have followed him for decades. As he's gotten older, one of the saddest parts of his story is the feeling of isolation. In his prime, Hearns was surrounded by crowds, reporters, fans, and celebrities. He had a life of glamour. But today, in his 60s, that spotlight is gone. A lot of the individuals who once stood alongside him have walked away. Some were there just for the glory. Others departed when the money was an issue. And with his health deteriorating, it has become more difficult for him to remain socially active. He still has devoted followers who recall his greatness. But people who've observed him in more recent times report seeing him frequently turn up alone at functions or with only a handful of close friends. The entourage that used to trail behind him everywhere, it's largely disappeared. And that's perhaps the most difficult thing for any ex-star to cope with, not losing so much the fame as the relationships that accompany it. Thomas Hearns can have been among the toughest of boxing's warriors, but beyond the ring, he's waged a different sort of battle, one against shattered relationships, personal regrets, and the lonely isolation that comes when the crowds fade away. Even the most powerful champions feel the burn of emotional distance, particularly when time and suffering have taken their toll. What his life looks like today at 66. Now 66, Thomas Hearns is worlds away from the fiery, high-velocity fighter remembered by fans from the 1980s. Today, life moves a bit slower for the man once referred to as the Hitman. He retains the swagger of a champion, but daily life is a far cry from his championship days inside the ring. Hearns lives a much more subdued life now in Michigan, where he was born and grew up. After all the glory, riches, and pandemonium that used to revolve around him, he's enjoying a quieter existence. His health isn't what it was, and that influences how much activity he can muster from day to day. Though he's not absent from the public eye, his sightings have grown fewer and farther between, and more emotional for longtime fans. In recent years, Hearns has appeared at some boxing events and charity events, but he frequently appears fatigued and physically restricted. He occasionally uses a cane or ambles very slowly. His body has obviously taken a lot, years of training, fights in the ring, and the usual effects of aging. But when he does appear, fans still applaud. They recall what he used to be, and they treat him with the respect that he gained with blood, sweat, and heart. Social media has become one of the avenues for some elderly athletes to communicate with fans, but Hearns doesn't upload much. He has an official Instagram and Facebook account, but updates are limited. When something is posted, it's generally through a family member or a friend. Other times, it's an old-school picture of him inside the ring, or a selfie from a recent appearance. There are always well wishes that flood the comments, wishing that he's okay. and recalling his fantastic fights. One thing that still sets him aglow is greeting people. Even amid the health issues and financial crises, Hearns still derives joy from interacting with individuals who were fans of him when he was younger. Whether it's posing for photographs, autographing gloves, or simply conversing with an individual who remembers the war with Hagler, such little things continue to make him smile. He's appeared at gyms and local boxing functions throughout Detroit, providing support to young boxers and regaling them with stories of his time. Hearns also engages in the occasional charity cause. Although he may not be spearheading major foundations or being the marquee draw for significant galas, he does give his name and face to a cause, particularly those related to youth sports or health awareness campaigns. He recognizes what boxing has done for him, and he wants to reciprocate, even if only minimally. Still, even with all these positives, there is an air of sorrow over his current circumstances. The one-time flashy fighter who dominated the boxing arena now lives in humble surroundings far from the affluence he was once used to. His health problems, financial woes, and personal demons have transformed his world entirely. Nevertheless, Thomas Hearns is still a brawler at heart. Even though life has landed some stiff jabs against him, he's still on his feet. And to those who grew up watching him throw lightning burst jabs, that resilience, subdued, unassuming, genuine, is as something to revere as any championship belt he ever earned.